So the starting point of this discussion today is about bottle-to-bottle variation. Like I said before, we believe in consistency. Okay, we have selected a process, co-extrusion, to make consistent production of our closures. And we want this to be applied to the industry in general. And we believe this matters very much. So the question that we had is that sometimes we talk about bottle-to-bottle variation, but some people would say, wow, bottle-to-bottle variation doesn't exist. We will hear people saying, well, bottle-to-bottle variation is part of the magic of the wine. That I have a hard time with it, honestly speaking. And then some people would say, well, it's only limited to very old wines. You have 20, 30 years old wines, and okay, they are inconsistent, but what do you want to expect after such a long time? So is it really something that is restricted to old wines? Are we talking about real problems here? If we see variation from a bottle to another, but nobody can really pick a sensory difference, maybe it's not a big deal. Okay, and so at the end of the day, can we understand all the variation causes, all the sources for this variation, and can we fix some of them? Can we improve some situations? So we decided to go from the end, right? We started from the end. So we just went to retail shop and we bought bottles. Because we said, okay, if there is a bottle-to-bottle variation, it has to be in the market. So we decided to go for 2 studies. We bought bottles that were closed with inner seals, and then we did another one with screw caps. Okay, so the protocol is pretty simple. We sample the wines from the retail shelves. We do some chemical analysis. So we look at the spread of the different analytical response we can have. We have a close look at the closures themselves, at the bottles. We measure all the things that we can measure. Okay, with what we are equipped in the lab, we measure everything we can. Then we run sensory. And so, like I said, we have done 2 studies, one with inner seals and another one with screw caps. So typical analysis that we did, LH size, TPO measurement. Well, we could say, okay, but if the bottles are already on the market, the TPO, so the total package oxygen, should be 0. Well, guess what? Sometimes you can still measure oxygen in a bottle, so there is something wrong here. Shouldn't be the case. Free SO2 as a marker of antioxidant sort of shelf life of the wine. CO2 content, because this is very important. And here we talk about gas, okay? So every time we think about oxygen, we should think about CO2 as well. Because if one is entering the bottle, probably the other one is exciting the bottle. Exiting? Exactly. Whatever. You understand what I said, all right? In terms of the color, we decided to go with LAB color coordinates and duo-trio sensory analysis. Okay, so inner seals bottles. Went in the shops, bought 25 white wines, price range 4 to 7 euros. So let's say quite mass production, but still, you know, in France, it's not that bad quality. You can have 2 euros, still sometimes okay, let's say. All the wines were from the same vintage, 2011, and we performed the analysis in 2013. So that was something like between 12 and 18 months in a bottle, okay? And we took every time 10 bottles from the wine, okay? So we had to sometimes to look a little bit to for these bottles, make sure they are all the same, etc. So some people of the, you know, managing the retail shop, they say, what are you doing here? You try to drink wine or whatever, boom, they kick us out. So we had to be careful sometimes, but so this is why we send students to do that, it's easier. Okay, so we looked at the results. So you see here, you have the number of the wines. So wine 1, 2, 3, well, all the wines are here, so the 25 wines. The free SO2 measurement for the 10 bottles. So you see every time you have one little dot here, it's 1 bottle. It's, yeah, 1 bottle, about 10 bottles, so free SO2 results for the 10 bottles. So first thing, the ones that are circled like this, 10 wines, are showing more than 4 ppm difference in free SO2. So why are we talking about 4 ppm? We are using the FIA-STAR system in our lab, and we believe that everything that is within 3 ppm variation from a bottle to another. For us, it's analytical error, it's something going on with the technology, but it cannot be really considered as a difference. So we take everything that is over that limit, so we took a little bit of a buffer, and so we take 4 ppm as a cutoff, okay? So 40% of the wines are showing some variation, okay, which is quite a lot already. But again, like I said before, is it really a problem or not? So we did the duo-trio sensory test. So just asking people, do you think this is the same wine or it's different wine or what is this? And 6 times out of the 25 times, or no, in fact 6 of the 10, because in fact we haven't tasted the other one, okay, we took every time the extremes. Okay, so we took the 2 bottles that were at the opposite, so we had to run the analysis the very same day that we were running the duo trio. So as soon as we had the result for the SO2, we were having the guys tasting the wines. And that's the challenge. Okay, so we asked the people to be ready. Be careful, today we have some tests to do, some sensory tests to do, so you need to be ready. And as soon as we had the results, we went there, we took this bottle and do the thing. Because we believe that if we don't see a difference here, okay, let's forget about the other ones, okay? So we just took the extremes to make sure that they were different. So 6 of the wines were deemed different, which is 24% of the wines. And I don't think that an industry should live with these results. So here it's easy to say it's France, etc., okay? But I can tell you, I don't think it's a French problem, because we see that many times in different countries. Then we said, okay, well, maybe screw cap is better, because it seemed to be a very consistent solution. So we did the same thing, 25 wines, but this time we had a harder time to find only white wines, because it's a little bit less popular in France, so we found 8 whites, 8 rosé, 9 reds. Price range is quite similar, 3 to 7. Wines from different vintages, because apparently the rotation of this wine is a little bit slower, so you can find a little bit of different things on the wine. So here, okay, it's not always a short time in a bottle. It can be a little bit longer. It can be 2 years or a little bit more. And again, 10 bottles per wine. So we did the SO2 spread analysis, and guess what? You get 9 wines out of the 25 that are showing differences. So it's a very similar level that you have with the inner seals, okay? 6 wines, again, were judged like being different wines. It's not very good for the consumer loyalty to the brand, okay? And surprisingly, we had this wine here. That was all over the place, okay? And at the same time, our panel couldn't find a difference. They said, well, no, the wine is the same. It's okay. So this one was really difficult for us to understand. In fact, we realized that this one was sweet, and our panel is not French guys, and we are not too accustomed to these sweet wines. We are more used to the very dry wines. And so probably there is an interference here that because we are not so familiar with this kind of wine, we have something. Okay, we said, okay, can we see differences here? So we look at the color. And here you really see with the A and B coordinates, you remember the 2 of the 3 coordinates to measure color, we could see that clearly there were 3 categories of wine color. You have to consider something is that this LAB approach to measure color is something that is very much linked to the visual property of human eye. Okay, so when you pick a difference with this, you have a lot of chance to relate that to what the consumer will see. Okay, so here it's clearly 3 categories of color. Okay, like I said before, we looked also at the CO2 variation. So that's interesting to see here that there's also quite a lot of variation. We consider that 200 ppm in this range of CO2 that we were analyzing is something that we may or we might pick as a difference. Okay, 200 ppm apart. And you have 8 of the wines that are showing big variation in terms of SO2, of CO2. Okay, so where can this variation come from? We have different things, okay? So we have the packaging material. So that could be really the bottles, the closures themselves. Bottling, again, we are, when I say bottling here, the mechanical aspect. Are we able to really properly manage bottling without even talking about the performance of the closures themselves or the bagging box or the things like this? Is the bottling process under control? And then the sources of oxygen, you have the oxygen coming from dissolved oxygen, the oxygen from the headspace, and the oxygen through the closure. Okay, so hand will cover the variation in DO, in headspace, so let's say total package oxygen, when we are going in the winery and we check with them what's going on. I'm going to look at the other things. So the bottling line perfectly tuned and the material carefully selected. Okay, so that's the ideal world. So what can we see first? When you look at the bottles that we bought, okay, before opening anything, we just took pictures, we just measure everything. So first of all, when we are talking about inner seals, you see that sometimes you have this kind of, so I don't know if you can see with the light here, but here is the headspace, or the hull edge, and this time it's the hull edge. Same bottle, sitting close together on the shelf. Huh? So you see that. Then you see this, a little bit less, but okay. So here you expect that it cannot be filling, okay? Maybe it's leakage. You are losing some liquid there. That could be filling adjustment. But sometimes you are looking at some interesting things too. You have this, so I don't know, again, if you can see this one here, but you have some capillarity thing that the closure is sucking wine, and that can influence the level of wine in a bottle. So depending on the material that you are using, you can have different things here happening. So you see, already for that, what is the reason for the observation? We need to put everything apart and look at all the factors and understand what we can improve or not. With screw cap, not getting any better. Look at the variation there. So like, I like to joke a little bit, but we are not supposed to look under the skirts. But when you look under the skirts, sometimes you see some interesting stuff, right? And with the skirt, you don't see the problem. Okay, so that's an interesting case. We have the 10 bottles here. We measured, like I said before, the TPO, so total package oxygen, SO2 libre, free SO2, and the CO2 gas. So you see here that one bottle is much more oxygen than the others. Okay, so here the oxygen is consumed by the wine, and this is what you expect when you have a wine that is on the shelf already. This wine, there is clearly something happening here. This wine is exposed to more oxygen than it can consume because it's still building up in a bottle. At the same time, you see the CO2. So there is clearly a leakage here. The free SO2 is consumed, the CO2 is escaped, and the TPO is increasing. So there is clearly a leakage issue here. So where can that come from? Well, when you look at the screw caps, it has been a little bit treated badly. I don't know if you see the dents here, the shocks that you can see all over the place here. So there is clearly something happening during the process where the bottles are shocked against the other. I don't know, maybe handling of the bottles, but there's something going on here that is damaging the thing. And when you look at the skirt again, you can see stains of wines that are there. So in fact, this was not a filling problem, that was a leaking problem. Okay? This one is even more interesting, I guess. Because here, and by the way, this is in France, but I think there's no reference there, right? But this is an American company exporting the screw cap bottles to France. Saranex liner. And this is where that's an assumption, right? So we think that these guys are using dripping nitrogen inerting system. So here it's a good process, right? You want to make the best of the wine, you want to inert the headspace, etc. But at the end of the day, you have this kind of thing here, and the bottles are under pressure. So you measure overpressure here. So we believe, or we think that when you drip nitrogen, if you don't let enough time between the expansion of the gas there and when you apply the cap, you are just trapping the pressure in it. And then you put the pressure on the liner, and the liner can withstand some pressure range, but not certain limit that you cannot reach, right? So here you have clearly a problem that you think you do good, and in fact you are doing worse than with nothing. So that's quite interesting. Here I have some translation problems, so maybe you can help me on some words here. I don't know how you say that in English. But the bottle influence is not is quite important to take into account. So for the inner seals, it's very important to have regular bottleneck profile, internal diameter. If they are all over the place, then it's very difficult to have the closure really making the effort it should do to make the sealing properties, especially when we are talking about light glass. Light glass bottles are, when we measure, are more often with a strange pattern in terms of internal diameters than the heavy glass. And when we talk about screw cap, it's very important to have different things under control. So the buvant, I don't know how you call that, but this is the plane surface here. It has to be plane, really, so that the liner is really... we had the translation, how do you call that? No? Okay, so you have this aspect that is very important. You have this little angle behind that is really where the system can really close the whole system. And you have this dimension here, the wide dimension here, that is making, without this right, forget about all the rest. Okay? And the funny thing is that when we visit wineries, which is quite often, generally speaking, people are putting screw caps. They tune the system with one bottle, one shell, and one liner, and then they change because they have new suppliers or for different reasons, different color, whatever, they have different suppliers. But the tuning is not adjusted to the new reference. And this is where you start having a lot of troubles. Every time you change something, you should change the tuning. Okay, so there are some simple things, right? You would say, well, we all know that. Well, but look at the consequence there. And it's not like we are making up stories. This is what is in the marketplace. Okay, so this is what N will cover. Like I said before, dissolved oxygen and net space oxygen during bottling. And I'm going to focus a little bit on the closure influence, so the oxygen ingress through the closures. So I'm trying to link, again, the closure performance to the observation of the consistency studies, the retail study. So we put the different variation that you have in free SO2 compared to the different technology of closures that were used in these bottles. So you see that depending on natural cork colmated microaglo, the Noma cork, injected molded, and there were one screw cap here, by the way, you see that you have the variation will be dependent on the closure technology. But it's not that simple because once again, in some of these cases here, you have a filling problem, you have some pressure problem or things like this. So this cut is not always that obvious, but generally speaking, this is what we could obtain on the 25 closures. So what we do is that we developed a method with our NomaSense technology to really measure the oxygen going into the bottle through the closure once again, and we screen the performances of other technology and comparing with the same methodology. So at least we can compare same results, same conditions of temperature, of if it's a dry or wet method, etc. So we put everything together, and we have some sort of a benchmark now of the closures that are outside in the market. So again, you see here our select series. When I'm talking about consistency, you see what I'm talking about. You have in the red bar is the mean that we measure for 10 closures. And you see the gray bar is the mean and max. So you see that for us, it's quite consistent. Again, we go back to the co-extrusion process that we are using, continuous process. And you see with natural, with 1+1, with microaglo, it's always more inconsistent. So it will depend on the different closures. So you have the mean. So it's important to know, okay, if you want more or less oxygen in the bottle, but you also want to know if it's going to be delivered consistently or not. So that's another dimension that is very important for the closures. So when I'm saying that the natural corks are more inconsistent, it's not that I want to bash the natural corks. It's not our goal here, but it's just an observation. And this is something that is well known by the natural cork industry because it's published by Amorim. So here what they did is that they took 600 natural corks from the same 2 planks. So they took 2 planks from trees, they punched 600 corks, and they measured the profile of oxygen ingress in bottles. And you see that you had 3 categories. But the most interesting thing for us is that when we put the results of our select 100, 300, 500, and 700, we are covering all this kingdom. But what we are proposing is that we know in advance how much we are going to deliver. While with natural corks, it's a little bit unpredictable, because even from the same plank, you can have that variation. Okay? And this is the thing that is related to, well, this one we can skip. Just the oxygen ingress and the liners. This is interesting to notice that with the tin, so this is a big study that was published by Crochet some time ago. So he was using a wet method to measure the oxygen ingress, but it's interesting that he looked at different things. And with the saran tin, of course, the oxygen ingress is very low and quite consistent. With the Saranex, it seems to vary quite a bit. And this is probably coming from the fact that sometimes the Saranex liner is a little bit less forgiving than the saran tin liner. So when we go back to the observation before about the dimensions of the bottles and stuff like this, you start having some issues of compatibility between the liner and the bottle performance or specifications. Okay, and still, some cases, we had some sensory issues because we also test some bottles where we didn't see a lot of SO2 variation, but still people could pick different wines. So we are also measuring TCA and stuff like this. And you can see that here you have 30 bottles of the same wine and you have some sort of a background noise sometimes. So it's never like it's a corked bottle, but you have some sort of variation there that could explain that sometimes you can feel a little bit more fruity than less fruity. That's another source of variation, okay? So just to sum up, like I said, that's the starting point, okay? If there is no bottle-to-bottle variation, okay, who cares about that? But there is clearly something happening in the market, and we think we have tools to fix some of the issues together, okay? So, like I said, closure performance, we need to know better about the oxygen ingress, the leakage potential issues, and the way to use the closures. I think it's very technical to use some of the solutions, especially screw caps, and this should not be underestimated. The packaging performance, okay, talking about closure, inner seals, bottleneck profiles, but also the fact that the bore is very plain, oxygen ingress, if we are talking about bagging box, Tetra Paks, the liners when we talk about screw caps, all this can be assessed. So when you receive that, the closures, you can measure that. You can make your own choice about the performance of the different materials that you are using. Bottling under control, like I said, well, wine preparation is very important. Because if you are doing two runs with, at 2 times a year, make sure that the wine preparation is exactly the same. Because one day or another, you will have these 2 bottles sitting on the shelf with the same label, the same, everything seems the same, but the wine is different. So wine preparation should be done consistently too, and the oil age management is obvious, but still some room for improvement apparently sometimes. Sensory deviation, okay, we said that, a clear, true defect, but sometimes some background noise that can impede a little bit. And now we are going to look at another source of variation. Okay, how can we minimize the variation from dissolved oxygen and net space oxygen when it comes to bottling? And this is what Anne is going to present now. I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take some questions while we are changing the mic and putting the next presentation. Thank you.